They planned my exit. I planned my return. They thought I was just the widow, just the leftover, but I was the fine print in the deed. They forgot to read, and this time I came with receipts. She hugged me with one arm. With the other, she twisted a knife no one could see. I used to believe betrayal came in shouting matches or slammed doors, but sometimes it walks up in designer heels and whispers in your ear at your husband's funeral. You're not even family, Claire said, smiling through her teeth. And then she stepped back, brushed invisible lint off my sleeve, as if she'd just done me a favor. The service was flawless, the kind where the flower arrangements are more expensive than the casket. No one looked directly at me. Not my son, not the priest, not even the man in the third row who once owed George $500 and never paid. They all looked past me, through me, like I was the empty space between eulogy and buffet. So I didn't stay. I didn't wait for the prayer circle or the casserole handshake line. I just left, quietly. No one followed. The house greeted me with stillness, not the warm kind, the waiting kind. Like even the air knew something sacred had been disrespected. I took off my shoes by the door like George used to ask. Even now, even after everything, the kitchen still smelled faintly of lemons and varnish, but the tea had gone cold hours ago. I drank it anyway. I sat at the table, alone, listened to the ticking clock, wondered if grief always felt this much like humiliation. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, because I didn't have the energy to perform it for no one. Instead, I opened the old file cabinet by the pantry. George never let me clean it out, said it held the boring parts of our life that kept the rest standing. Inside, warranty receipts, tax forms, cards I'd written but never mailed, and one thick envelope, dusty yellowed at the edges, labeled in George's handwriting, house, title, and deed. Do not toss. My hands shook as I opened it. And there it was. My name. Only mine. No transfer. No cosign. No amendment. The house was still legally mine. They hadn't touched it. They hadn't even noticed. Claire, with her spreadsheets and her smug little nods. My son, with his don't worry, Mom, we'll handle it. They'd planned everything except remembering whose name was still on the deed. I leaned back, in the chair, let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since George's first stroke, and I laughed, once. Not bitter, not triumphant, just surprised. Then I stood, walked to the fireplace mantel, picked up the framed photo of our wedding day, slightly tilted, dust along the edge. I adjusted it, not because it mattered, because something had to be straight again. As I returned to the table, the house didn't feel like a grave anymore. It felt like proof. Proof that even if they'd stopped seeing me as family, George hadn't. I flipped the page behind the deed and froze. There, in ink almost faded, was a sticky note, just in case they forget who you are. I stared at it. Then, slowly, carefully, placed the deed back in the envelope and slid it into my purse. The purse they had complimented at the wake, the one they didn't know was carrying a reminder. I'm still here. And I'm not done. Buried him. I unearthed my rights. It's strange finding power in a drawer that smells like dust and liniment. The deed didn't shimmer. It didn't sing. It just sat in my hands like something waiting to be remembered, like it had been patient longer than I had. I read it twice, then a third time, just to be sure. Grief wasn't playing tricks on me. No co-owner, no joint title. Just my name, centered and legal, like George had quietly drawn a boundary the rest of them had no idea existed. I thought about the months after his first stroke, when he couldn't button his shirts but still insisted on reviewing insurance policies. Claire had been so helpful then, so eager to take things off my plate. She spoke like a woman raised on TED Talks and power brunches, efficient, warm, in the way tea is warm when it's been reheated 5 times. She said things like, "We'll take care of it. And you shouldn't have to worry about this stuff, Eleanor." Back then, I wanted to believe she meant it kindly, that my son, her husband, was overwhelmed, that they were stepping up, not stepping over. But now I could see it for what it was. The planning, the folders I was never shown, the whispered talks in the hallway, the way she'd say the house instead of your home, the way my son stopped looking me in the eye when I asked what they were doing with the finances. They'd never filed a transfer, never changed the title, because somewhere in their hurry to become the new heads of this family, they forgot to finish the paperwork, forgot the one thing that would have actually made their plan legal. I wasn't supposed to find this Not now, not with their schedules already blocked off for contractor bids and listing appointments. I remembered something I'd overheard a few weeks ago. Claire on the phone, voice low but smug, telling someone she was planning to open up the kitchen, maybe add French doors, rent it out or flip it. We'll see. French doors, in the house George built with his own hands. Claire, who once called the porch quaint but dated. Claire, who whispered at the wake that I wasn't family. I let out a laugh, short, dry, one of those bitter little sounds that slips out when irony finally catches up with injustice. They forgot who they were dealing with. They forgot that I was the one who read every appliance manual cover to cover, that I knew where every fuse, receipt, and signed form lived. They forgot I read the fine print. They'd tried to erase me politely, smoothly, with polished smiles, and real estate terms. But George left a signature behind, and with it a quiet, undeniable reminder. I'm not the one being taken care of. I'm the one holding the house keys. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself another cup of cold tea. This time, I didn't mind the chill. It reminded me that not all warmth is worth trusting. As I sat, the old landline rang, still mounted on the wall, like George liked it. I stared at it, let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up. It was my son's voice, smooth, casual, coached. Hey Mom, just wanted to say, don't worry about anything, okay? Claire and I will take care of everything. I looked at the purse on the table, felt the envelope inside it, then closed my eyes and smiled, because they were too late, and I was just getting started. They thought grief made me stupid. Grief made me sharp. I stopped lighting candles, not because I didn't miss him, but because light attracts people who want to see you mourning, not healing. Instead, I lit my mind. The next morning, I pulled out the accordion folder from the pantry drawer, the one George labeled just iron case in Sharpie. Not elegant, not organized, but ours. I started digging. Receipts, letters, tax files, checks written in his shaky handwriting, and then a small, spiral-bound notepad dated back 5 years. His checklist: paint, trim, fix, garage door, add Eleanor to the Roth. Don't forget to finish will. The last line was underlined twice. I didn't panic. I got precise. Because if they were going to build their little kingdom on my silence, I'd hand them a moat made of paper. I sorted everything into piles: bank statements, hospital forms, notarized documents, legal drafts. Every corner of the kitchen table got a story. The toaster sat on estate documents. Mercy's dog bowl guarded 2 letters from the HOA, and that's where I found it. One form. HOA compliance agreement. Signed, Eleanor Hollis. Only, it wasn't my handwriting. My E has a loop. My R curves in. Claire's forgery was clean, sharp, corporate. She hadn't even tried to copy me. She just assumed no one would notice. I stared at it so long the ink blurred, not from tears, from rage, too dry to cry. The next day, I drove to the notary office. Didn't call ahead, just showed up with the form in hand and George's old notebook in my purse. The notary, a woman younger than my oldest Castian pan, tilted her head as she examined the paper. This wasn't signed in front of me, she said, frowning. She checked the stamp. And that's not my seal. It's a digital copy. She looked at me, cautious. Do you want to file something? I didn't answer, just nodded, slow. When I got home, I scanned everything, made copies, dated each file, labeled folders like they were armor, evidence, forgery, timeline. It felt clinical, but underneath, I was rebuilding the truth, brick by brick. The house was quiet, except for the slow tick of the old wall clock, the one George never let me replace. I let it echo through the rooms, felt its steadiness press against my own. I paused by the stairs, thought about all the times I'd carried laundry up with one hand and dreams with the other, and how I used to stop halfway to catch my breath and hear him call out, "Don't give this place away." It was never a warning. It was a blessing. I closed my eyes and whispered back, "I won't." Then I opened the bottom drawer of George's old desk, the one I hadn't touched since before the hospital, and there it was, tucked behind a stack of coupons and faded bank slips. A manila folder, unlabeled, quiet. I pulled it free, opened it, and froze. Inside, George's original will, untouched, unsigned. Everything else was noise, but this was the missing breath in a conversation I didn't know we'd paused. The air shifted, just slightly. like the house itself was listening now, waiting for what I'd do with it. They asked if I needed help. I told them I already had a plan. The thing about secrets is, they don't always hide in shadows. Sometimes they wait in manila folders and stainless steel thermoses, like the one I carried into Martin Lasker's office that morning. The receptionist offered water. I declined. I had what I needed. Martin looked older than I remembered, not tired, refined, like a man who'd learned to outlast storms by documenting them. He greeted me with polite confusion, until I placed the folder between us. "I need 10 minutes, I said, "and your sharpest glasses." He opened it. Papers slid out like a slow confession. The forged HOA document, the unsigned will, George's checklist, my labeled timeline. By the third item, Martin stopped reading and looked at me differently. Not like a grieving widow, like a woman who came prepared. "This is thorough," he said. I let him sit with that, watched as the tea on his desk went cold, untouched. I didn't speak until he asked the right question. "Do you want to pursue this quietly or make it loud?" "I want to make it final," I replied. He leaned back, steepled his fingers. "Claire doesn't have a leg to stand on. Your name is still on the title. The forgery alone, that's enough." I nodded once. The kind of nod that doesn't ask for permission. Just acknowledgement. We talked through the legal dust. George's trust could be revisited. Claire's involvement challenged. But more importantly, my will could be rewritten. It was the first time I used the word out loud. The one I'd avoided because it tasted too strong, too real. "I want to fight," I said. "Not with fists, with proof, with presence." Martin didn't flinch, didn't ask why. He just opened a fresh folder, clicked his pen, and said, "Let's do this right." For the first time since the wake, I exhaled without apology. He printed a preliminary form, slid it toward me. "Anything else you want them to know?" I picked up the pen, paused, and wrote 3 words beneath my name. "I remember everything." When I stood to leave, Martin followed me to the door, not because he had to, because he understood this wasn't just paperwork anymore. Before I walked out, he leaned in, voice quiet but solid. "You're not just defending property, you're defending history." And I realized, he was right. This wasn't about square footage. It was about the space I'd carved with memory, laughter, grief, and the right to keep it intact. Outside, the wind shifted. Not cold, not warm, just honest, like the kind George used to call good porch weather. And I knew this house would never belong to anyone else until I said so. It remembered the way my feet fell, even if they didn't. Single quotes. To moving back into a house you never left is a peculiar kind of grief. You find your own fingerprints on the banister, and they feel like someone else's. The mail still came with my name, but the silence, it had been rearranged. Claire had started packing before George was even cold. I found boxes labeled guest, bedroom, and storage donation, like my life had been sorted into categories she could manage with a spreadsheet. But the house hadn't let go of me. It remembered. The scuff in the hallway from George's walker. The squeak in the third stair where I used to pause and breathe. The dent in the kitchen floor from when I dropped the pressure cooker in '94. It remembered everything. The first thing I did was open every window, let the cold air in, let the house exhale. Then I went to the kitchen, pulled open the junk drawer Claire had emptied and organized. Inside, countertop samples she'd left behind. Slate gray, marble, polished concrete. None of it matched the warmth of the sun that hit the oak in the morning. I threw them out without ceremony, because some things don't need to be recycled, just removed. Then, behind the sink, tucked between old dish gloves and a bottle of half-used Polish, I found George's gardening gloves, stiff, smudged with old dirt, still folded the way he left them. That's when the tears came. Not dramatic, not loud, just the kind that arrive so slowly you almost miss them. I sat on the floor, right there on the kitchen tiles, and cried into my sleeve like a child hiding, in plain sight. Not for him, not for the betrayal, but because the house had waited for me, and I hadn't realized I needed it to. After I cleaned myself up, I made tea, lit a single candle. The scent was lavender, soft, old, familiar. Then, I went to the den, to the writing chair no one had sat in for years. The one with the broken spring, and the ink stain on the armrest. I sat in it, let the ache of it settle into my bones like homecoming. Then I opened a fresh notebook. No lines, no margin, just paper waiting to be filled. I titled the first page, "Things They Didn't Ask," and I wrote, That I loved George even when he forgot my name for a week after his third stroke. That I learned to make lemon pie not because I liked it, but because he did. That grief doesn't knock it, rewrites the locks. And that silence is only golden when it's chosen. Page after page, I let the house hear me again. My words echoed softer than memories, but louder than absence. Then, around midnight, just before I blew out the candle, I opened my laptop, not to scroll, not to distract, but because I needed to check something. There it was, tucked into the county assessor's site. Pending filing, Claire's name. Application for transfer of interest, secondary claim, dated next week. I stared at it. The house didn't need protecting. I did. And maybe, just maybe, so did George's memory. So I picked up the pen again, wrote one sentence at the bottom of the page. You almost got away with it. Then, I closed the notebook and whispered to the quiet room, not anymore. The rosemary still bloomed, so did I, even without their permission. The first cut was silent. Just the rustle of overgrown sage as I pulled it from the roots. The garden hadn't been touched in months, wild leggy, stubborn in places, but somehow, beneath the mess, the rosemary had survived, even thrived. I knelt in the dirt, no gloves, let it bite my palms. There was something honest about it, something Claire's curated grief never gave me. The air smelled of soil and old rain, and I remembered what George used to say as he tucked seeds into the ground. This land listens, you just have to speak in seasons. So I did, with my hands. Rosemary, time, defiance. The tools were rusty, and my knees didn't bend like they used to, but that patch of earth didn't care how I arrived, only that I did by noon. My fingernails were blackened, my back ached, but I felt more alive than I had in a year of casseroles and condolences. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years waved from the sidewalk. One woman I barely remembered, Sheila, maybe, brought over a pitcher of water without saying a word, just set it beside me, nodded once, and left. Like she knew this wasn't a moment for conversation, just witnessing. Later, I came inside and found George's old gardening book wedged behind a row of out-of-date cookbooks. Still smelled faintly of mint and mold. I flipped through the pages. His margin notes were everywhere. South gets the best light. Don't plant basil near root. And then, tucked on a yellow sticky note, between the pages for spring herbs. The land remembers who watered it. I didn't cry. Not then. Just pressed my palm to the paper like his voice had reached through the dirt, and maybe it had. That evening, I brought in a few fresh clippings, rosemary mostly, put them in a small jar by the sink. The same one Claire once called clutter. I let the stems lean whichever way they wanted. Then I sat at the kitchen table, made myself a sandwich, and opened the mail, mostly junk, one utility bill, and then a cream-colored envelope with slanted handwriting I hadn't seen since Christmas. Lily, my granddaughter. Inside, a small card. No glitter, just ink and heart. Hi Gran, I know things are weird right now, but can I come visit just me? No mom, no pressure. I miss your tea, I miss your house, mostly, I miss you. I held the card to my chest, let the quiet hold me back. And then I reached for the same notebook I'd started the night before. Things they didn't ask. On a new page, I wrote just one line. Yes, no questions asked. I sealed it in an envelope, taped a sprig of rosemary to the flap, walked it out to the mailbox myself, barefoot. Let the grass press a memory into the sole of my foot. As I raised the red flag on the box, I looked out over the garden again, still messy, still reclaiming itself, like me. And for the first time in months, I whispered something I hadn't dared to say out loud. She's coming back, not for the house, not for an inheritance, for me. And that changed everything. I set the table for one. She brought forgiveness, but she didn't come empty-handed. The first knock came softer than I expected, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to ask for anything. I opened the door before she could second-guess it. There she was, Lily, backpack slung over one shoulder, a bag of tea in the other. Eyes that looked too grown for 17, but still held pieces of the girl who once hid her report cards behind the fridge magnets. I didn't hug her, not right away. I just stepped aside and let the porch creak its welcome. She walked in like she remembered, kicked off her shoes at the second tile, the one that cracked after George dropped the piano bench, took a long look at the rosemary by the sink. I'm glad it's still here, she said. I smiled. Me too. Dinner was already on the stove. Soup, lentil and garlic, thick enough to feel like a meal, soft enough not to need a reason. I set 2 bowls, 1 spoon each. The silence filled the space between us like steam. Not uncomfortable, just warm and hovering. She blew on her first bite. Then, softly, "I used to think your kitchen smelled like stories." I blinked. "It still does," I said. Some of them just needed time to steep. We ate slowly, no rush, no performance. The kind of dinner where the only thing past was presence. After the second bowl, she pulled something from her hoodie pocket. A photo, creased edges worn. It was me, holding her mother. A baby, maybe 9 months old. Neither of us was looking at the camera. I was laughing. Her mother was reaching up, fingers tangled in my necklace, the one I hadn't worn in years. "I found it in one of Mom's old boxers," Lily said, watching me. She never framed it, but she kept it. I ran my finger along the edge of the photo. "That day," I said slowly, "George had just come home from a graveyard shift. He took this before falling asleep in his chair." Lily's eyes softened. "I like that you remember the story around the picture." I didn't ask why she brought it. I didn't need to. We moved to the den. She curled up in George's old recliner, legs tucked beneath her like she was 6 again. I brought her a blanket, the same one she used to call itchy but safe. We didn't turn on the TV, didn't scroll, just sat. Then she pulled a second item from her bag. A padded envelope, sealed, handwritten. "From the attic," she said. "I didn't tell Mom. I found it." I recognized the writing before I touched it. The slightly crooked loop in the G, the too small lowercase e. "George." I reached out with both hands. Suddenly aware of how long it had been since I touched something, he sealed himself. I didn't open it, not yet. Just held it in my lap. Lily watched me with that same steadiness George once did, like silence wasn't a void, but an offering. "It's okay if you wait," she whispered. I nodded. "I know." We sat like that for a while. 2 women, 3 generations apart, holding proof that the past doesn't always rot. Sometimes, it waits. When Lily got up to get water, I looked down at the envelope again. No return address. No date. Just my name, written like a promise. The candle by the window flickered a breeze from somewhere. And I knew this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of the part they didn't think I'd survive. And in my hands was the chapter they didn't know George had already written. The dead don't always leave silence behind. Sometimes, they leave instructions. I opened it at the kitchen table. Same spot I used to iron George's work shirts. Same spot Claire once told me I should let go of the past. The envelope tore clean, almost reverent. Like it knew it had waited long enough. Inside, 2 pages, folded twice, aged at the edges, but the ink hadn't faded. George's handwriting, unshakably his, deliberate, slanted, tired. The letter wasn't to me. It was addressed to Claire, but I read it anyway. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say what I needed. And knowing you, you're already making plans. That's not a bad thing. But there's something you need to understand before you decide. This house belongs to anyone else." My hands stilled. The letter pressed against my knees. Lily hadn't moved from the recliner. She watched me like I might vanish. "Your mother-in-law is not a placeholder. She's not a sentimental relic or an inconvenience. She is the reason this roof didn't cave in when I lost my job in '91. She held this family up when I couldn't. You see a necklace. I see what she wore the morning after her miscarriage, when she still made pancakes for a 6-year-old who didn't know why she looked like silence." I swallowed, but the air felt thick. I gave her that necklace not as a gift. It was proof that she lived through something, that I saw her, that someone did. There was no anger in the words, just clarity. That kind of honesty men only get brave enough to write when they think no one will interrupt. Don't try to erase her, not because she's your elder, but because without her, none of this you, me, this house would have lasted. This home remembers who scrubbed its floors, not who labeled its closets. That line, it cracked something open. The sob didn't arrive like a crash. It bled in slow, from the throat, from somewhere between rage and relief. Lily rose, crossed the floor without hesitation, and placed her hand gently over mine. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped my face with the sleeve of George's old flannel, the one I hadn't been able to donate. The letter sat folded in front of me, now sacred. That night, I went to my room, lit the lavender candle again. opened the drawer where the old unsigned will still sat. I pulled it out, ran my fingers along the empty signature line, then walked it out. Said the fire pit was still damp from yesterday's rain, but dry enough to hold what needed burning. I struck a match, watched as the paper curled in on itself, blackening, hissing, letting go, because that will never belonged to me. Not really. I came back in, pulled out a fresh form, the one Martin helped me draft, signed it in blue ink, stamped the date, filed it under my terms. The house exhaled with me. Later, as I stood at the kitchen sink, drying a single plate, the landline rang. I let it go to voicemail, but when it finished, curiosity got the better of me. Martin, I played it back. Eleanor, call me as soon as you can. Claire filed a motion this morning. She's contesting your mental capacity. Claims you're not fit to update your own will. The plate slipped, hit the edge of the sink with a crack. Not broken, just chipped. Stared at the phone, at the garden outside, at the photo Lily left on the fridge. She was coming for me again, but this time, I wasn't walking into it unarmed, and I wasn't alone. They questioned my memory, so I brought theirs, printed, signed, and dated. The courthouse smelled like dust and disinfectant, and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe fear dressed up in perfume, or arrogance with a fresh haircut. Claire sat across the aisle, all beige confidence and staged grief. Black heels, low bun, pearls. She clutched tissues like they were props in a drama she directed. I wore navy, George's ring on a chain beneath my blouse, and silence that had been sharpened into something more precise than rage. The judge looked tired but not distracted. He scanned the file Martin had submitted 2 nights earlier. My revised will, the forged HOA document, George's letter. Claire's lawyer started with a soft tone, like I was an elderly aunt, confused about her own birthday. He said words like declining capacity and emotional instability. He said Eleanor has experienced significant disorientation following her husband's passing. I smiled, because disoriented women don't keep their own file tabs in chronological order. Martin stood. His voice didn't rise. He just walked them through the receipts, the copies, the timeline, the notary's affidavit, the handwriting match. Then he handed me the letter. George's. Would you like to read this aloud? The judge asked gently. I nodded, and for the first time, I let my husband speak through me in public. I didn't read the whole thing, just enough. You see a necklace. I see what she wore the morning after her miscarriage, when she still made pancakes for a 6-year-old who didn't know why she looked like silence. Claire's head dipped, maybe in shame, maybe in calculation. But I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the paper, the part that said, don't try to erase her. This home remembers who scrubbed its floors, not who labeled its closets. When I finished, there was a stillness in the room that couldn't be faked. Even Claire's lawyer folded his notes like maybe he already knew. The judge didn't wait long. Motion to contest is denied. He said Ms. Hollis is of sound mind and legal authority. All documents stand. He didn't pound a gavel. He didn't need to. The silence did it for him. Claire stood abruptly. Her heel caught on the carpet. She didn't fall, but for a second, she teetered. A single, unsteady breath in a woman who thought she'd already won. Lily waited outside the chamber doors, back straight, thumbs hooked in her backpack straps. She looked like her mother once did, but she looked at me like no one else ever had. That was brave, she whispered. I opened my mouth to answer, didn't, just took her hand in mine. And together, we walked out onto the marble steps. Sunlight warm, wind soft. The kind that lifts hair off your neck like a small blessing. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, my phone buzzed. One message. Claire, you'll regret this. I stared at the screen, then tapped it off. Because regret is for people who traded their name for convenience, not for women who remembered where every document was hidden. I slid the phone into my purse, next to George's letter, folded once more, and kept walking. Some things are said to make the silence honest. Others are said so no one can rewrite it for you. The first letter wasn't for forgiveness. It wasn't even for peace. It was for truth, the kind I couldn't speak without feeling like I'd betray my own voice. So I wrote to my son, Dear Michael, you stood beside your wife as she erased me in real time. You said nothing. That was louder than anything, she whispered. I didn't sign it, didn't seal it, just folded it once and tucked it between the pages of my journal, the one Lily now called Grand's Arma. Then came Claire's. Dear Claire, You mistook my quiet for absence, but I was here in every drawer you labeled, every plant you planned to remove, every piece of furniture you thought would be easier to donate than understand. You didn't fail me. You underestimated me. That one, I burned. Because she didn't need to read it. I just needed to release it. Lily found me on the porch the next morning, tea in one hand, ink smudged on the other. She sat beside me without asking. You should share some of that, she said, flipping gently through my notebook. I laughed, short and unguarded. What? Publish my grievances? No, publish your grace, she said. Other women need to hear what you've survived. That night, after she'd gone upstairs, I printed out chapter 4, the one where I talked about what it means to set the table for people who still hope you'll forget what they did. I sent it to a women's journal I'd followed for years but never dared to submit to. Didn't attach a bio. Didn't ask for a reply. Just dropped the envelope in the slot outside the grocery store, between coupons and catalogs. A week later, I received an email. We read your story. We'd like to publish it in our fall issue. Full feature. Would you be open to speaking at our resilience forum at the library? I reread the sentence 5 times. The forum, the same one Claire once suggested she hosts a fundraiser at, the one I wasn't visible enough for. I hesitated, not from fear, from unfamiliarity. The Eleanor who made lemon pie for thankless birthdays wouldn't have gone, but the one who kept receipts. She needed to be there. I emailed back, said yes, then pulled out George's old briefcase, the one that still smelled like cedar and cough drops. That night, I wrote my speech. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't neat, but it was mine. I wrote about silence, about watching a home be treated like a transaction, about the kind of grief that makes you sharper instead of soft. And I wrote about love, not the kind you begged for, but the kind you protect. Then, just before closing my laptop, I clicked open the journal's website. There it was. My piece. Front page. Over 8,000 shares. Titled, The Table They Forgot I Built. I stared at the screen, not in disbelief, in recognition, because I hadn't just survived them, I'd written myself back into the room they tried to walk me out of. Outside, the porch light flickered, not broken, just steadying itself, like me. I folded linens in years. Some things I let go. Some I pressed between pages, like they still had something to teach me. The first box was labeled donations, not because I was giving up, but because I was making space. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a snow globe with one missing flake, and whispered, "This one stays." We kept it. Of course we did. We packed slow, not like we were escaping, like we were remembering out loud. Each drawer held a small ceremony, a grocery list in George's handwriting, a dried-out lipstick I wore to his retirement party, one card from my daughter, never opened, because I knew what it would say, and it was better left unsaid. Lily found an old Polaroid tucked inside a cookbook, me and George, sunburned and smiling, holding matching mugs. She studied it like it was a map. "This house needed your goodbye," she said. I nodded. So did I. In the upstairs hallway closet, beneath a stack of wool scarves and faded holiday linens, I found the small velvet pouch I'd hidden years ago, my original wedding ring, not the fancy upgrade Claire insisted I should get, the one from the courthouse. Simple, thin, honest. I didn't cry. I kissed it once, then tucked it inside a small cedar box marked keep. By the third afternoon, the house started to echo. Fewer rugs, fewer distractions, only the weight of memory, measured by cardboard and tape. George's chair stayed untouched, the recliner with one broken lever, and the smell of pipe tobacco trapped in its fabric. We passed it every trip from room to room, letting it linger, like the final note of a song. "Will you miss it?" Lily asked, gently, fingers brushing the armrest. "No," I said. "I'll remember it." Then we folded the last of the blankets and laid them across the box like a prayer. Evening came wrapped in golden light. The kitchen looked smaller without the clutter, but warmer. The rosemary in the window still leaned toward the sun. I brewed one last pot of tea on that stove, the same one that had burned soup and boiled 10,000 apologies. Lily set out 2 cups without asking. We sat on the floor, backs against the cabinets, quiet, until the knock came. Not gentle, not tentative, just loud enough to declare, "I'm still coming in, whether you want me or not." We didn't move at first, didn't even look at each other. Then Lily whispered, "She doesn't know you don't belong to this house anymore." I smiled. "She doesn't know. I never did." The second knock came sharper, impatient, insistent. Lily stood. I followed. Together, we walked to the door, and I opened it. She came to settle things. I offered terms. Closure wasn't free, and I finally knew my price. She stepped inside like the house still belonged to her plans, took in the half boxes, the folded blankets, the rosemary in the jar, but not me. Never me. Claire wore sunglasses, too big for the light outside. She took them off with a practiced air, the way you might remove a veil you hope still hides your motives. "Hi, Eleanor," she said, too gently, the kind of soft that doesn't land on skin, just slips past it. I didn't answer right away. I handed her the envelope instead, the one I'd prepped 2 nights ago. Top page. Mutual release of future estate claims. Her fingers twitched. She looked at it like it might stain her. "What's this?" "Closure," I said. "On paper." She scanned it, brows tightening. Not reading, just pretending to. The second page held a signature line, one for me, one for her. Both already dated. "It waives rights to anything tied to George's estate, real or residual," I explained calmly. "Future disputes, property, probate, all of it." Then I added, "Mutual, we walk away, clean." She looked up, a flicker of resistance, but something in her eyes hesitated. Maybe it was the folder on the table, labeled legal. Maybe it was Lily watching from the stairs, silent, steady. Maybe it was knowing she'd already lost the public fight. She picked up the pen. "Do you want to discuss?" "No," I said. She signed, quick, sharp, like a woman trying to prove something to herself. Then she handed it back, eyes defiant and uncertain back into the folder without ceremony. Not smug, just finished. For a second, neither of us moved. The room was too still, like it remembered how much of it she tried to repaint. "You know," Claire said, voice almost human again. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." I didn't respond. Let the silence do what my forgiveness wasn't ready for. She kept going. "I just thought George would want something different. For the family." She meant control. She meant convenience. I walked to the counter, poured the last of the cold tea into a cup, set it in front of her without asking. "You thought wrong," I said quietly. She stood, adjusting her purse strap like armor. "You think you've won?" "No," I replied. "I think I'm done." Claire turned, paused at the door. She looked around at the walls, the window, the chipped tile. For the first time, I saw her hesitate. "You'll regret this," she murmured. I shook my head. "Regret is heavy. I travel light now." She left, no slamming, no shouting. That just a quiet click of the door closing, and all the history it couldn't keep out. I stood there a while, let the silence return, let it be mine again. Then I reached for my phone, dialed Martin. "It's done," I said. He didn't ask for details, just said, "Good," because what she signed, it's binding. She can't contest a thing now. She walked away from it all, permanently. Outside, the garden caught the wind and danced without needing permission. Inside, I sat at the table Claire thought she could inherit, and sipped tea from the cup she didn't recognize I'd bought for myself. Not a gift, not a gesture, just a choice. One of many she no longer got to make for me, and for the first time in years, I felt the door didn't just close behind her, it opened. Something ahead of me. I didn't sell a house. I planted a future. And every room I once protected now protects someone else. When the papers cleared, I didn't list the house. I released it, no for sale sign. No open house with polite strangers judging the grout lines. Instead, I sat across from Lily at the kitchen table one last time and said, "It's not going to another family." She blinked. "Then who?" "Women who need it more than I ever did." And just like that, we got to work. Martin handled the transfer. A domestic violence nonprofit, Safe Haven Roots, would take title, not to profit, to shelter, to restore. The kitchen George built with his hands would become a space where mothers boiled water for children who still flinched at footsteps. The back garden, once overrun with sage, would become a greenhouse therapy plot. And the upstairs linen closet, the one Claire wanted to maximize. Now it would hold towels for survivors who arrived with nothing but breath. Lily cried when I told her. Then she opened her laptop and began designing the fund's website. We named it the Hollow Roots Trust, because broken doesn't mean shallow. I told her it means something held on when no one noticed. The sale proceeds were split between the trust and a housing scholarship for women starting over after leaving abusive homes. No long applications, no essays, just proof they were choosing themselves. The news spread, not viral, just steady, like light through a window that was always there. Someone just finally opened the curtain. Neighbors stopped by with envelopes, checks, cards, hugs that didn't feel performative this time. Even Sheila, from 2 doors down, brought cookies, said she wished she'd spoken up years ago. I told her, there's still time for people who mean it. We held the ribbon cutting 3 weeks later, a quiet afternoon, the sun sharp and honest, no podium, no speeches, just a few words, and a rosemary clipping planted by the porch. I knelt down, pressed the roots into the soil with my bare hands, felt the earth welcome it. Felt George somewhere in the stillness. Lily took a photo. Smile, she said. I did, not wide, not for anyone else, just enough to say, now it matters. Later that night, I made myself tea in a borrowed kitchen. My new apartment, smaller, simpler, but quiet in the right way. Like peace, not pause. I sat on the windowsill with the old journal in my lap, wrote 2 lines. Some things are inherited, others we make worth inheriting. Just as I closed the cover, my laptop DINGED.I opened the email. Subject, Library Forum, Keynote Confirmation. They didn't just want me to speak, they wanted me to headline. My name, in bold, no footnotes, no addendums. I stared at it for a long time. Then I whispered, just for the walls of this new place to hear, she built something they couldn't take, and now, I would tell the world how. They erased me in whispers. I answered in sentences. And when I finally stood to speak, the room didn't just hear me, it remembered me. The library smelled like old paper and someone's strong cologne. The kind of scent that clings to dust jackets and decades. Rows of folding chairs, name cards, a pitcher of water sweating on the podium. I had 5 pages in my purse, folded once, typed in 14-point double-spaced, not for the audience. For me. Lily sat in the front row, filming on her phone like she was capturing more than footage, maybe proof. Proof I had survived the part of my life no one had planned for. The host called my name. No middle initial, no George's wife, just me. I walked up slowly, not because I was nervous, because the moment deserved to be felt all the way down. The microphone crackled once, then settled. I adjusted it, cleared my throat, then opened with the line I almost deleted a dozen times. I wasn't a burden, I was the legacy. You could feel the silence after that, not empty, but ready. I told them about the house, not its square footage, its memory. How a home can be stolen without a single lock picked, how grief can make you sharper, how being erased quietly is just violence in lowercase. I told them about the rosemary, the forged forms, the chair I didn't miss, and when I read the last line from my speech, I didn't choke, I let it land. They tried to write me out, but I remembered how to spell my own name. The pause that followed was loud, holy, almost. Then the applause rose, slow, then full, not clapping for politeness, clapping like they'd just watched a woman put her bones back together in real time. Afterward, a young woman with purple hair and eyes like bottled lightning came up and hugged me, tight, no hesitation. She whispered, "You gave me a name." I didn't ask what she meant, I just whispered back, "Keep it." Lily met me at the edge of the stage, no words, just a smile so proud it made my knees weak. She handed me her phone. "Already sent to the Journal," she said. "Your voice deserves replay." We walked outside. The sky had that late evening tint, all lavender and apology. I watched as the wind moved through the trees like a breath that hadn't been held too long. And for the first time since George's funeral, I didn't feel like I owed the day an explanation. Back at the apartment, I changed into my softest cardigan, boiled water, sliced an orange. Then I opened the cedar keepsake box, the one marked keep. Inside, the old wedding ring, the rosemary clipping, and one small silver key, the spare I'd kept from the garden door of the old house. I turned to Lily. Held it out. No fanfare. Just this. You'll know when it's time. She blinked back tears, took it without speaking, and I knew, legacy wasn't what we leave behind, it's what we hand over, before anyone else decides what it's worth. I didn't slam it, I just turned the knob, and let it shut behind me. That's the difference between leaving angry and leaving ready. Anger rattles, readiness releases. The cottage was small, 1 bedroom, sunlight in all the right places, windows that opened without sticking, which felt like a miracle. After 34 years of squeaky frames, I moved in with 4 boxers, 3 plants, and 1 dog. Mercy limped more these days, but she still followed me from room to room, like I was the story she hadn't finished reading. Lily lived 2 blocks away. Close enough for coffee, far enough for independence. She came over that first morning with gardening gloves and a smile so bright it could have tilled the soil by itself. We planted rosemary. Then thyme. Then something I didn't recognize. She said it was wild joy. Fitting, I thought. Hard to contain, impossible to fake. I kept writing. Not for applause. Not even for healing. Just for the record. Because some women spend their whole lives being edited. One afternoon, a white envelope arrived. No return address, just my name in a handwriting I'd only ever seen behind shopping lists and birthday envelopes. Claire. Inside, a thank you card, simple, embossed, the kind you pick when you don't know what else to say. No apology, no explanation, just, you gave me more than I deserved. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. See, I didn't cry, I didn't call. I placed it in the drawer next to the old measuring spoons George once bought me on a whim. Because some things don't need a response. They just need a resting place. That evening, I lit a candle. Lavender, like always. I sat at the window with my journal open. Mercy curled at my feet. The garden in view. The page stayed blank for a while. But my chest didn't. I wasn't full of words. I was full of stillness, the kind that settles after you've finally said what needed saying. Lily stopped by as the sun dipped low. She leaned against the doorframe and watched me sip tea. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Better, I said. Quiet feels honest now. We sat on the porch together, not talking, just existing. The rosemary swayed beside us, taller than last week, stronger. Before she left, I gave her one of the garden keys, not because she needed access, but because she'd earned it. Then I walked back inside, hung my cardigan, wrote 3 lines. Legacy isn't a place, it's a decision. I made mine. The kettle hissed once more. The windows glowed with dusk. I walked out into the yard, barefoot, felt the earth meet me with soft welcome, closed my eyes, and let the sun kiss my face like it knew I didn't just sell a house. I bought my freedom.